Hello, Needle Movers. What you are about to hear it's a very small clip of about half an hour of a coaching session between myself and a professional career coach. What we're going to be doing is discussing a specific topic that I've brought up to the coach, and you'll have the opportunity to be the fly in a room and listen to that conversation, listen to the question that have been asked, my answers, and the exploration of the topic. I hope you enjoy it, and don't forget to follow our podcast and ensure that you subscribe. Thank you.
So, hello.
Hello to you.
So, basically, we are going to talk about topic 3, I think it was, always being productive.
Did you want me to rephrase it maybe and give you a couple of examples?
Yes, I was going to ask you if you can, the structure would be to actually, go through what's going on.
Yeah.
And then see what it comes from and try to find some kind of solutions at least or actions for you to slowly get over that.
Yeah, that's fine. So I have noticed that I will tend to have days in my, days of the week where I will have a long day at work. I will then get all the work done. Of course, I will have some leftover work and I will make a list for the next day. And that's all well and good. I then do some of my podcast stuff, which is all well and good. And then, of course, there is some parts in the evening where I am in theory supposed to be relaxing. So I will sit down on the sofa, maybe I'm turning on the TV, spending some time with my wife. But then I realized that, for example, when I watch TV, I start feeling this almost like sense of, I would almost call it guilt in a way, where I almost feel as if I shouldn't be doing it. And there is this little voice in my head that says, you should be doing something more useful with yourself. You should be doing something a little bit more productive. And I've noticed it that, it was maybe on 1 or 2 days. And what I actually did is I ended up going back to my notebook and I had some leftover work to do for the podcast. And I just started doing it. But this kept reoccurring. And it's something that almost happens every night if I'm not careful, that I have this inner monologue that tells me that I'm not being productive and I'm not being useful. And I should be doing something with myself during that time. And I'm not quite sure where it's coming from, but also it doesn't really allow me to relax on my time off, because it's not something that just happens on the evening. It's something that I notice that if I'm not careful can also follow me when I go on a holiday, for example. And I guess, as I've mentioned, it doesn't allow me to fully relax and fully just be in the moment. I'm always wondering and worrying about this sense of not being productive or not using my time well.
Okay, that's very relatable. Honestly, I go through stuff like that sometimes, so that's very relatable. Honestly, to be in the sofa and thinking, I should be doing that. Why am I not doing that? Am I wasting my time here? So I understand. I completely understand.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
No. We're more than what you think. You said that the thoughts in your mind that pass by are like, oh, I'm not productive enough. I should be doing X and Y. I want to say first that I think it's really good that you do lists for the next day. I think that's something really good to just get everything out of your head and push it for the next day. And not everyone does it. So well done, honestly. Just I'm just back on the back of my head, I think on my situations, and you said that you have that little voice and that guilt. Why do you feel you need to be productive all the time? Why?
So maybe there is an element of so Mark and I have got quite a few plans at the moment in terms of like things that we want to do and achieve. And we basically have a year plan and a year plan to achieve, and then we got stretch objectives. And I wouldn't say that we are behind, but at the same time, it's almost like you've got those 4 or 5 hours in the evening, or you got those 2 or 3 hours, I should say, really. And I guess that voice is making a connection between the free time that I have, and there's so many things that we should be doing for the year, and I think, oh, really, I should be seizing the opportunity. And I think part of it is because maybe in the past I've not used my time effectively, and because of that, deadlines have slipped, or they've basically the projects that a personal project that I've tried to do, I've kind of not realized, and maybe there is that element of failure looming in the background saying to me, oh, if you continue on this path, really it's going to happen to you again, and you should really be making the most out of this free time that you have.
Okay, so it's kind of an overcompensation here.
Possibly, yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned the F word, failure.
Yeah.
What's failure for you?
I think, especially like in the context of, I'm going to call it the extracurricular activities, such as the podcast, failure is not being able to achieve what internally I feel like is success. And and the reason for not doing that is because I have not followed through with what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So, for example, that could look at myself not putting myself out there. As for example, I'm very excited about the technical stuff, maybe putting the website together, coming up with a logo, doing all the fun stuff. But then when it comes to perhaps having to do the sales and the actual business stuff that gets you from A to B, that stuff is always delayed. And I know that it has happened in the past. And it's almost like, well, it's because you haven't done that you failed. And that's what I see as failure in some ways.
Okay. And instead of failure, could you reframe that word?
The first thing that came to mind was incompetence.
Oh.
That's probably not a good one, is it?
What I mean is, when we look at failure, failure means that something didn't work at all. But what did you learn from those failures?
I think, especially now that I'm looking at it retrospectively, some of the things I learned is that it's all well and good to have a plan, but to push forward and get things done makes a difference. So in the context of let's call again the extracurricular, that for me has meant not just talking about putting a podcast together, planning it, etc., but it's actually meant producing it, releasing it, and putting the ideas out there, and not, well, actually, yes, being worried about what would other people think, but at the same time not caring and just getting it done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good learning point.
I think it is, yeah. I think that's something that certainly I have done differently from the past.
Well, in that case, you have to be proud of yourself for learning from that. In that case, would you call it failure if actually help you be better?
You're right. I think if you reframe it and look at the lessons learned and the, I guess, associated successes from those lessons learned, really I shouldn't be looking as a failure, but perhaps more of a stepping stone that got me to somewhere a bit further.
Yes. I mean, I don't know how many businesses have started in the world in the whole history where they were a failure. Instagram was a failure. I don't know if you know the story of Instagram.
I don't actually. I don't think I know the background of it.
It used to be the first idea. I mean, that's what I read in different places. the main idea was to create an app. Do you know the app called Foursquare, Swarm, where you actually check in restaurants, take pictures of food? That was an app
Oh yeah.
from back in the day. So that was supposed to be one of these, and it
Right.
failed, like huge fail. And then they reframed it, and then they realized that people enjoy the pictures. So why if, instead of just doing all the check-in and all that, we just keep it as pictures? And out of a lot of failures, Instagram came up. Without those failures, there would still be an app for taking pictures to your food, and rate it, and it would be very different and probably not that successful.
Right.
So I'm just using an example, like a big scale example, because sometimes we see failure as something that is completely negative, but we can actually learn a lot from it.
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah.
Um, what do you think? And that's just a very open question, but what do you think if you actually switch off?
As in what I will think in my head if I switched off.
Yeah.
Um, so I've got a memory of the last time that I switched off. And
Oh,
that was me in Bali in 2019, I think.
thank God you switched off in Bali.
And I just remember it was my first ever 2 weeks holiday.
Yeah.
First holiday I brought to the East. And I just remembered not caring about anything else. I was just there in the moment, enjoying
Okay.
the experience, enjoying the heat, enjoying those beautiful rice paddies. And I just remember being at peace. There was this one particular moment that I was on this small, tiny island where you can walk around in just 2 hours called Gilimino.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was just having like a drink of water. I was there with my wife, and we were just watching the waves coming in and out, and that's all we were doing. So I remember that time being like fully switched off.
That sounds really nice. Really, really nice.
I know, right? I should go there again.
And how can you use that energy you had in that moment when you're sitting on the sofa having a well deserved rest and start thinking, oh, I should be doing this and that? How can you use that energy? How can you use that thought on that moment?
I guess what I could do is I mean, I remember the image quite strongly, and I remember how I was feeling, what I was doing. I guess in a way, I could try and almost visualize it,
Yeah.
and perhaps by visualizing, I can get myself in a state where I worry less about the long things on list to do, and focus more about that. I guess the same inner feeling that I was having at the time.
Yeah. Of just enjoy the moment.
Yeah,
And also to come back more fresh, I guess. Otherwise, you're just gonna drive yourself to exhaustion and nothing is gonna get done.
yeah.
I mean, that's what leads to burnout in the end sometimes. So you have to be careful with this kind of stuff, because yeah,
Yeah.
it can lead you to actually not do anything in the end. So, but yeah, that sounds really good to visualize that time in Bali. That time where you were actually able to just put a wall there and say, not now, just not now. But that's great, honestly. um I don't know if you are familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy.
Cognitive behavior. I think I've heard it before, but not overly familiar.
Okay. There is its sister or cousin is cognitive behavioral coaching,
Cognitive
and
behavior coaching.
it's a
Okay.
it's a technique where actually you base yourself on, I don't know if, I hope I can explain it correctly. um, with that technique, you look at your thoughts, and those thoughts, they have aligned to your feelings, and aligned to your behaviors. So it's everything like a vicious circle. So, for example, if you're in the sofa and you think, I should be productive, it's 10 p.m., but I should be doing something. And then your feelings is that you feel guilty. So what do? Your behavior is that you stand up and you start doing. So that's kind of your mind is rewarding yourself. Your mind is giving you that dopamine of, oh, I'm doing, and that's kind of a reward to that behavior.
Right.
So the main thing here is to reframe those thoughts and beliefs. So the feelings will change and the behaviors will change. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So said that, do you want to give it a go? A quick go, because of course I know that we are time constrained.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, if happy to give it a go if you can get me through it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm not gonna just
Throw
yeah.
me under the water.
No, absolutely. No. I'm with you. In coaching, you always have a companion. You're not by yourself, just sorting it out. That's one of the things. You have someone with you who's not gonna judge you. So don't worry, I'm here. So we start with the thoughts. I know you mentioned some before, but what thoughts come to your mind when you're on the sofa, and like what's the reality? What are those thoughts?
So thoughts are that I should be using my time more effectively, and
Mhm.
I should be more productive, and that I shouldn't waste time watching
Mm,
TV.
okay. And that leads to your feelings.
Um, so in terms of feelings, I feel there is an element of frustration. I'm
Yeah.
frustrated at myself because of the fact that I'm not using that time effectively.
Hmm.
And also, I guess to some extent, I'm annoyed because I don't seem to learn from past lessons.
Mm, okay. That's interesting that you think that you're not learning from your past.
And I think perhaps the annoyance is more with because it's a repeating occurrence. Perhaps it's not so much the past lessons, but it's more around the fact that, oh, I had this feeling yesterday and I did nothing about it. I had this feeling
Mm,
today and I did nothing about it. And then it kind of, by the time you're on the fourth day, you're like, why am I still not doing anything about it?
yeah. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. And what behavior do you get in the end? What do you do in the end?
What I end up doing is that I end up pulling out my phone and
Hmm.
I will, or my iPad in that case, and I will try and do things at the same time. So that could
Mm,
look like doing the social media from my phone,
yeah.
or perhaps I will pull out the iPad. I will put ear one headphone in, one earpod in, and I will try to do video editing at the same time as I'm there sitting with my
Oh,
wife trying to watch TV.
okay. How does your wife feel about that, by the way? Just a
Um,
side question.
Probably I tell her to skip this episode, but um, so I think that if she's doing so she's quite into gardening and she's a baker. So if she's doing things that she's interested in at the same time, then I
Mm,
don't think she minds too much. But if we're there, for example, watching a movie or meant to be there
yeah.
with purpose, then she will clearly be annoyed or not very pleased with me pulling out my phone and being distracted.
Okay, I understand. Yeah. And okay, so we have thoughts, feelings, and behavior now. And now is the tough part. What thoughts are available to you? Like, And when I say available, I mean thoughts that can come naturally to you, because I people sometimes put words in your head, or they tell you, oh, you just should take it differently, you should take a rest, but they don't tell you, you know, uh exactly, it's about what you think, really. It's about how can you convince yourself, and how can you reframe these thoughts of, I'm wasting my time, I should be more productive, with, this is my downtime, or something like that.
I guess some of the thoughts that could be available. One of them is certainly I could think about whether what I plan to do is really a priority or whether it's really needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and certainly, like if I thought that and asked myself a question in that time, it would probably turn out to be that it's not needed, it's not necessary, that it's not a priority.
Hmm. That's a really good one. That's a really good one to ask yourself that question. Okay. Do you have any other thought? Just asking. If it's just
Yeah.
that, it's okay. I mean, you can take your time.
The other thought that comes to mind is, I mean, referring back to the behavior of me trying to do video editing at the same time as watching TV. The question there for me is it really effective? Because I
Hmm.
end up probably taking 3 times as long because I'm trying to do two things at the same time. And
Ah,
so the thought there could really be, is there a point of me dividing my attention when I am much better off resting
yeah.
and probably taking a quarter of the time the next day?
Yes. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Okay. Well, that's really good. I'm taking note of everything, and I can share it with you at the end if you want.
Okay.
If you want. I mean, I don't know if you can understand my handwriting, but um so if you ask those questions to yourself, if you have those thoughts, how would you feel?
So on the latter one,
Hmm.
um, it's I think I would almost feel as if do you know when you're doing like a bit of work and it's very tedious and it will take a lot of time and then you find a shortcut to do that work? It's almost like the feeling of relief. It's like, it's not going to take me as long as I think it's going to take me. And it's
Yeah.
almost like the little bit of relief that comes.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that feeling. Yeah. That's how I felt the first time I saw Excel, Microsoft Excel.
Not many people will share that same thought.
Okay. And what about the first question that you ask, to ask yourself if that's a priority?
um, I think that would almost make me feel like um, non guilty. If I
Hmm.
realize that it's not a priority, and if I realize that it doesn't have to be there and
Yeah.
then I can almost like liberate myself from having to worry about not doing it
Yeah.
because I'm almost reframing the importance.
Yeah. That's really powerful. Really, really powerful. Yeah. And of course, what will be the behavior?
Well, I would hope that the behavior is that I keep my phone in my pocket, um, and keep the iPad on the table
Yeah.
and can just be there in the moment, even if it's just watching some sort of a trashy TV show.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes that's needed.
Sometimes it's needed.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Okay, so how do you feel about all this in a nutshell?
um, I think in most of those cases, I would say it's easier said than done. Um,
Hmm.
However, at the same time, I've never spent a lot of time reflecting on it. I know that I had the thought. I know that I've had the feeling of frustration with myself, and the thought of, oh, I should be more productive. But I never stopped to think: is it a priority? Do I need to do it now? Could we wait for tomorrow morning? And it's simple questions, yet it kind of places the problem more in perspective.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay. And just to wrap up, because I know, as we mentioned, that with time constraint. So you said that you never really gave it too much thought before. It was
Yeah.
just something you were living with. And now you have a couple of questions that you can ask yourself when this happens. How likely do you think you're going to do that?
I am quite good in following up on things. um, but I need to make it. I need to make it visible because what the
Uh-huh.
risk is that when I'm sitting on the sofa, the risk is that the thought will come, but this
Mm,
conversation will not be at the forefront of my mind,
yeah.
and I need to find a way to make it visible so that I can remember it as it happens.
Okay. How do you think you can make it visible?
Yeah, that's the part I'm not sure about.
Okay. Well, you can think about it. You don't need to answer now. It's something you
Maybe I
can.
could put a calendar reminder for
Yes.
8:30 p.m.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it looks like you're gonna make it more visible. TBC, but we. It looks like there's a bit of progress in here. How do you feel after this session? How do you feel about thinking about how you described the problem in the beginning and how it's now?
It feels more. It feels more manageable,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels more manageable because I was able to explore it in, I guess, like it's almost like a systematic way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going through, I guess, the thoughts, the feeling part, my action, and I think it's that systematic and putting the link between the thought, the behavior, and the feeling that, as I guess, it's almost allowed me to step back a little bit and think about
Mm.
those alternative thoughts that I could be having, which is really helpful and impactful.
Okay, well, I'm happy to hear that. Well, so I think we are done with the session. It looks like you got to your conclusion. Maybe you can think about what's gonna get on the way of that. What's the obstacle or obstacles about that? But maybe we can talk about that later if you want.
Hello, 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 and welcome to a new episode of the Needle Movers podcast, a podcast that brings you the lessons, concepts, and books we wish we'd known earlier in our life. If you're listening today, you will have heard a different voice, and if you're wondering whether I've replaced Mark, yes, I have. For this episode, I've replaced Mark. Not really, not really. Mark is here. Yeah. So I'm joined by Mark today, but also I'm joined by our guest speaker. And our guest today is Pilar. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. And what you've heard at the very beginning has been a small snippet of my coaching session with Pilar. Now, would you like to tell us what you do for a living?
Well, I'm a life coach, a workplace life coach. During my evenings and weekends, I work full time somewhere else during my daytime. But I'm here because I'm a life coach. So, what I do is I help people, in a nutshell, I help people to unblock themselves in any issues they may have, workplace related, in general. It can be imposter syndrome, it can be self esteem, it can be confidence, time management, stress management, etc.
Cool. And Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or is this something that kind of came up for you at some point when I don't know, you've had an experience and you thought, I want to be that person that solves that?
I think it came thanks, in quotes, to COVID, to the pandemic, because I always was interested in everything that goes in the mind. I always read stuff on psychology, even neurology sometimes. It fascinates me so much. But I never really connected the dots. And during the pandemic, of course, you have a lot of downtime, a lot of time to think. We were on lockdown. So I started thinking I really wanted a purpose, a bigger purpose than what I had at the time. Like I wanted to make a difference and help others somehow live the world a bit better than when how I found it. So I started thinking, and that came very naturally, really. And I studied the diploma. It took me a bit more than a year, but yeah, it felt right from the very beginning that that was what I had to do.
I mean, sorry, Mark and I know one or two things about starting something off during the pandemic, don't we, Mark?
The whole existence of this platform. I was gonna ask though, because like knowing that you wanted to do something and something with purpose, finding something that is as specific as workplace life coach, like how did you, do you find people firstly are aware that this is something that exists, let alone, because coach is such a broad term, right?
Yeah.
But then when it comes to this specific, I guess, niche of it, how did you yourself find it, and do you find that people are aware?
Yes, I find that people is aware. It can be workplace, career, life coaching, and I actually have a couple of clients that actually find me via Google when they Google workplace life coaching or workplace
Okay.
coaching, and it's a small niche, but in the end, you cannot be that broad. And to be honest, I had moments in my life where I needed a coach, and I never had the money to pay one. So I wanted to become the coach I never had back in when I really needed someone, when I was really close to burnout in my previous job. And I never had it because I couldn't afford it. I'm not saying that I'm really cheap, but I'm the affordable version, basically. I want to be able to be accessible for management and under, basically, in companies, not just the CEO, the managing director. I want to help the employee.
Now that makes sense. And I think one question that I know that I had in the past, and probably still do in some way, what we just covered in the introduction was, I guess, a problem that typically I could also speak to about to a therapist. And I guess what our listeners may be wondering about maybe is what's the difference between perhaps having a therapist and having a career coach?
It's different to go to a therapy with a psychologist, counselor, psychiatrist, because they focus more on mental health problems. So someone that has been actually diagnosed with some kind of mental health, it can be from depression to bipolar to ADHD. So they look after neurodivergent people, basically, and especially they look after their past and how to create coping mechanisms with that past. Whereas the coaching is more on the prevention side. It's and it's more facing the future. So a life coach is going to help you achieve your goals. It's going to help you think a bit differently. Of course, you have to dig a bit deeper on what happened in the past to understand where you are.
Yeah.
But it doesn't dwell in the past, and it doesn't focus in the past and what happened and why. And so it's more on the, okay, this happened. That's okay. We acknowledge it. How can we cope with that now? So in the future, you're going to be okay. And you're going to have the tools to be able to carry on with your life.
So if someone comes to you and let's say that they're interested in coaching, but they're not quite sure, what would you tell them? What would you tell the key benefits are? What can they expect after spending, I don't know, 2 or 3 months with you?
So one of the main benefits, and something that a lot of people has asked me, is if I can talk to a friend or to my family, why do I have to pay a life coach? And the answer is normally that a life coach is going to listen to you without judgment, and there's no agenda. You are the main character in the sessions and in the conversations. I'm not going to put my agenda. I'm not going to tell you, oh, your problem is not important. Mine is more important. I'm not going to tell you, oh, what you have to do is this, this, and that. I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to be there, listen to you, and help you think outside the box or help you rewire, if that makes sense. So it's great to be able to talk to friends. I talk to my friends every day, and we send a lot of voice messages, and that's great. But when you need someone who actually listens actively to you, that's when a coach comes in, basically. So you can have a bit of a deeper understanding of what's going on. With a friend, you can talk about the issue, but it stays on the surface. What we have done today, for example, is just diving, and we've done a short session. Imagine how that could be in a 1 or 2 hour session if we deep dive and see exactly what's going on, how can you do, what are the obstacles. It's very deep stuff, and also it helps you as well, since you understand yourself a bit better and get those tools to be able to cope in the future. It also helps you to understand other people. So sometimes we're so self-centered that we think that everything is about us. And one day in the office, I don't know, someone comes in and doesn't say hello, and it's like, oh, they're pissed off with me. What have I done? And you spend 2 hours thinking this person is pissed off with me because they're normally very nice and they haven't said anything. You don't stop and think, maybe they're going through something. Maybe something is happening to them. It's not with me, like sometimes we just put that bubble where everything revolves around us, and is not true. So that also helps you a bit to understand other people and to actually help them as well and give them the tools.
We are quite egocentric as humans, aren't we?
Yeah. I was gonna ask because when preparing for this episode, we were trying to think of how to phrase questions or the problem statements, let's call them, because at least we knew. But in reality, when people come to you, do you find that they know exactly what they want to be coached on, or they have to have a specific preferred format in asking it, or is it like open? Like, what's the variance in, I guess, in how you receive different people who are trying to get coaching?
It depends. I mean, there's some people who actually have a very clear idea, and that's the ideal world, when they sit down and they tell you, I want to talk about this and about this topic. For example, now I have a client that he tells me, next week I want to talk about that. Everything is on a certain topic that he wants to improve, but he chooses what he wants to talk about. And that's how it should be, really. It's not about, oh, I'm starting the session and I don't know, what do you want to talk about? No, you are the client. You are the one who chooses the topic. You are the one who chooses what we're going to talk about. And sometimes topics can go a bit off topic, but try to put it back, like, okay, you chose this today. You chose A, B, not C and D. But yeah, sometimes you have people who don't have it very clear, or they don't prepare. Normally they just show up. But you need to, if you want to actually take action and you want to improve and you want to change something in your life, you need to be prepared to prepare the sessions and to think about the actions that you have to do between the sessions. So yeah, it's better to have someone specific. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. It sounds like to make the most of your session, you should come there at least prepared, have something you want to evolve or growth with, and then utilize that, and then use the space in between making actions on it rather than just letting it fester and repeating the same session you did before. But one thing you mentioned as well was I've never heard of it before. So I know cognitive behavioral therapy, but never cognitive behavioral coaching. Is that one of what are the different techniques I guess you use for coaching? Because that's new to me. I could try and apply it, but the books I've read are long-winded, I guess. What are the different types of coaching methods, I guess, methodologies that you employ?
It's a technique basically, and it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy that's used to treat anxiety, depression, even some kind of bipolar. So it's based on that, but more on the let's rewire your thought side, not on the let's experiment or let's see, or it's more focused on the side of, okay, let's see how can we move on, let's see how can we change that behavior.
And what other kind of techniques do you, let's call it do you have in your toolbox in a way?
I do. I have mainly it's about questions. It's about asking the right question at the right time, picking up some words. Sometimes I had a coaching session once where I think in 2 minutes the person said the same word about 8 times. So it's like, okay, that word is important. Can we just talk about that? But I also can use visualization. I can ask the person to help me to make a list about things, or a table, or live when we're there. Role plays. I enjoy role plays. Some people is a bit skeptical, but sometimes role plays help. Even I have done role plays playing the client, for example, and the client playing someone else, or the other way around, the client and me choosing a character, for example. So it can be, there's a lot of different options, but mainly, let's say that the questions are the core of the session. And then on top, you can do different things. You can also recommend meditations, mindfulness. But questions are the biggest element.
On the topic of role play, I'm gonna sound a bit crazy now, but usually when I know that I've got quite a difficult conversation to have with an individual, what I will tend to do is almost have the conversation in my head. So I will try to play all the angles from from their perspective. What if they were being completely unreasonable, and what would they say to me, and what would I answer to them? And I have like this massive, huge monologue in my head. And I can see how having someone else to role play with could actually be more useful.
I did one during my workshops when I was studying, and it was really good. Honestly, it was the first role play I did, and it felt so good. Probably that's why I like them so much, because the first one felt really good. And I was playing the coachee, and she was playing her mother.
All right.
And it was a tough conversation she needed to have with her, and her playing her mother kind of made her understand the point of view that her mother had that she never understood before. So it can be a click in that moment, or maybe you can just have your evolution. But role plays are, like role plays.
It's almost like that shift in paradox when you're able to understand the other part of you when you have that role play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Hearing about families makes me wonder, like, what are some of the other topics or common themes that people tend to come to you with when they is it typically family? Is it typically, or is there a trend anywhere?
The trend normally is self-worth, confidence, stress management, especially nowadays. I have the feeling that everyone is 3 times busier than before the pandemic. And those are the 3, I would say. Self-esteem is always the core of most. If you dig a bit deeper on time management, on stress management, on imposter syndrome, it always goes down to your self-esteem and how you see yourself, how how you see yourself coping with stress. Because sometimes it's just you thinking, I can't do that, but you actually can. But it's that self-esteem saying, no, 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 you can't do that, you can't cope, you can. So yeah, but normally it's confidence and self-esteem and stress management.
That's quite interesting because I was having quite a similar conversation with a therapist, and the topic that came out is a lot of the self-esteem and a lot of the, I guess, fundamental reasons why you doubt yourself and that you behave the way that you do. It's all rooted at childhood level.
Yeah.
And it's the experiences that you had with your parents or your grandparents or whoever you grew up with that have actually shaped who you are now, and you still behave and follow the same behavioral pattern from when you were a child. Yes, maybe you're not having tantrums, but at the same time, that kind of behavior chain that you had, such as, I'll show you who I am, still plays out as an adult, and it's really interesting. And I think it's quite powerful to at least be aware, because at least if you can name your dragon, then you got a lot more power to try and do something about it.
Yes, definitely. And it's one of the main things to be able to name your fears and your anxieties. And so once they have a name and once they're delimited, they're not that scary. Really.
So we talked about like some of the things that people come to you with, like in terms of topics and themes. I guess for our listeners, if there was one or two coaching points that you could give away, what would they be?
Well, there's a few, but
you're like, I got a whole book.
Yeah. I would say, and that's something that I put recently on Instagram. When you do a mistake, most people just dwells on it, and you keep on thinking, "Oh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that?" And it's normal to think about the negatives, and it's normal to be on that side. But just ask yourself one question: How does dwelling on that mistake is going to help me? It just doesn't. So instead of dwelling on the mistake, it's going to make you 1,000 times feel much better to actually do something about it, see why the mistake was done, and how to solve it. Instead of giving a problem, give yourself the solution. Try to find a solution or a countermeasure for that to not happen again. Instead of just dwelling, because I see a lot of people, oh my God, I've done it so wrong. And they spend weeks thinking about that one mistake that they did, big or small. We're all human. So that's take up one. And two, I would say, as I said, define your fears. It's especially with anxiety, when you're feeling anxious, it's like, oh, I'm anxious. I'm anxious about what? Just write down, just go down, write down what's the anxiety about, what's the fear about, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of being discovered, fear of, and once it's narrowed down, you can do something about it. Once it's delimited, if it has a name, you can actually tackle it. Otherwise, the bigger it is, the wider it is, and the more vague it is, the scarier it gets and the more anxious you get. So yeah, that will be my two take-ups. Don't dwell on your mistakes, just be productive. Like, think about, how can I do now, how can I learn from it, and and put a name on your fears.
Sounds like you're saying to take your fear and put it, or more like your anxiety, and put it in a box so that you can contain it.
Yeah. Put a name on it. Like, I don't know, call it Lydia, or call it, I don't know.
Too late now. Lydia is the name.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it sounds people... like. Yeah.
No, please tell me.
I was just gonna say it sounds like it's clear. Basically, you take your mindset and turn it into a solution finding rather than a problem building type of mindset. Is what both of those sound like they lead towards, which I guess is very easy to or dig up or unearth the problems around us versus converting them into the solutions we actually want and getting actions and doing that. So yeah,
Definitely.
it's interesting.
Yeah. A lot of people with imposter syndrome put a name to it, that voice. And when that voice starts saying, "Oh my God, how dumb are you?" You just turn and shut up, Lydia, or shut up, whoever.
I feel so sorry for any listener called Lydia.
I'm sorry for the Lydias. I really like the name. It was just a name. It's someone I knew when I was a kid. It was the name of my first bully. So
no, it's too late now. Lydia is definitely everyone.
Sorry, Lydias. I love you, girls.
Sounds like I might have a few new names in my life tomorrow.
Well, fun fact, Freddy Krueger, the name of Freddy Krueger was the director's bully, director of the movie of the first Freddy Krueger. The name of the bully in school of the director was Freddy Krueger.
He used his full name.
He used the full name of his bully to call one of the biggest scary movie characters in history. Yeah.
And that's a lesson for all the bullies out there. Don't be a bully because you never know who you mess with.
In everyone's nightmares. I have an extra question, if you don't mind, which is just, do you have any books you think are worth recommending? We do like to learn. And if anyone wants to read up on ways, is there anything that you would suggest at all that's just of interest?
Yes, but that's the last one I read, but you have already commented that on your podcast.
Doesn't matter, that's perfect.
The subtle art of not giving a F.
You can say it, we don't mind, but yeah. Okay, good. Listen back to our old episode. I like
that. I listened to that episode and I thought, you're so spot on, guys. Like, it's such a good book. And I'm reading one that is called Neuroscience for Coaches. It's really good as well. It's very plain language, of course. I'm not a neuroscientist. And not just for coaches, but it helps you understand a bit how your brain works. And it talks about each part of the brain, which is not the boring part because I like it as well, but then starts talking about the hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and that's where it gets a bit more saucy. So it's good to understand how our brain works. At least for me, I'm a bit of a geek in that sense.
No, it sounds really good. I mean, that's the reason why I think I like Simon Sinek so much, is because he connects the concepts to I guess the hormones and the way that the brain works. So it's interesting to give the working science background as to why things happen.
Yeah.
I've got one final question for you.
Yes.
If you could go back in time and speak to younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh God. What younger self? What? Ooh. How old?
I like how the guests they always come up with the questions like, "Ooh, how far back can I go? Will I have the lottery ticket?"
I can answer that. I can answer that question, which is which younger self? Which one younger version of yourself needs it the most? Whichever age gap or time period you think is most important for you, that's the one you get to talk to. So
it's a good one. I would say my younger self when I was 27, when I moved to London. And I would tell her, be patient, everything is gonna come around. Just be patient, and especially don't take things too seriously. Don't take yourself that seriously. I think that's what I would tell her. Yeah.
Be patient. And don't take things too seriously. I think our audience could use that as well.
Yeah, Mark, stop taking yourself so seriously.
Yep.
Actually, no, for you it's the opposite, isn't it?
Honestly, once you stop taking yourself so seriously, you start living much better and being happier. I can tell you that. I done the change, and yeah, I have the feeling that I enjoy life so much more than when I was just taking everything too personally, or everything was about me, or yeah.
It sounds like the lessons you teach people are the things you yourself have learned as well with your free time, which is where else the best to get it from. But no, thank you so much.
I mean, if you haven't done the work, you really cannot. I mean, of course, you can teach, not teach, but you can help others. But if you have done the work, you can feel the other person's pain. You understand better the path. You can be more patient. It's different. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And if any of our listeners want to find you, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me on Instagram on Clarity Coaching, and they can find me also on LinkedIn with my name, Pilar Cifas Obiol. Spanish, I have the surname, sorry. And also I have my website, yourclaritycoaching.com. They can find me in any of these 3 different places.
And those will all be in the link to this episode. So just
thank
look
you
there.
very much.
No worries.
Yeah.
I just want to take this time just to thank you, because I think this episode has been quite unique in a way. I always found that I knew about what coaching was, but didn't really know what it really was. So what I'm really wanting to achieve with this episode is to provide a snippet into what coaching really looks like, from almost like being a fly in the room and listening to a conversation, but also being able to ask you a few questions in terms of like what someone can expect, what your experiences are, and what other people are also going through. So I wanted to thank you for your time, and really let you know that we really appreciated like recording this episode, because I think it will add a lot of value.
Thank you very much, guys, and thank you for having me as a guest. I really like your podcast, so it's an honor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Mark, I'll leave it over to you to do all the announcements.
With the announcements. Well, no, she's just plugged herself. You know where to find us. We're on our website, theneedlemovers.xyz, and we're on social media, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, wherever, at the.needle.movers. Besides that, as always, we have been your hosts, myself, Mark Jasons, and my co-host,
Valerio Tommaso, and also joined by Pilar. And again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And until next time.
Adios.
Adios.